I have to read this section.
Okay. Give me just a second. You
It's
good?
worth noting right off the bat that map is
Oh,
not oriented.
sorry. Josh, can you turn off? Well, actually, I'll do it here. I'm going to be in here in just a second. Can you turn off your? Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, you just flip the button here.
Yeah.
It's Dalton's.
Oh, sorry.
Good. Come on, Michael.
Okay. Right.
Just forwarding back there.
Yeah, just left and just hit the right button and you'll go.
Great.
All right.
So this map right here is a map of Washington, D.C. from 1924. I'm originally from the D.C. area, and if this map extended a little further, I would live right about there. When I went to high school in D.C., so I feel a pretty strong attachment to the city, which is why I picked it for my map. So the first thing to notice is that the map is not oriented in the traditional north-south orientation that every single other map I've seen of Washington, D.C. is. The city was a planned city designed by Pierre L'Enfant, designed to be in neat grids and rows, oriented north and south and east and west. So it's pretty unusual to have a map like this that is skewed a little bit. Second is the orientation of the US Capitol. Again, in most maps of Washington, D.C., you see it framed around the Capitol because it's the dividing line that divides the city up into the four quadrants. You've got northwest, southwest, southeast, and northeast. And you can see it still has these red lines radiating outwards, but because it's on a slant and because it's off to the right side of the map, it's a little bit disorienting for people who might have seen other maps of Washington, D.C. Third, something to note is that all the federal buildings or important buildings are outlined in black. And so Tom updated my map. And in the old map, it just had the original footprint of the White House. And then you can see now that they added on the East Wing and the West Wing. The Oval Office did not yet exist, but it's quite interesting looking at a lot of the footprints of these buildings and seeing how they change through each iteration and how they're very different today as the federal government and its buildings have expanded. Fourth, it's worth noting that Anacostia in Southeast DC, which today is a predominantly Black neighborhood and still was back in the day, is pretty much left completely off the map. So Washington, D.C. actually extends well out to out here, but all of that was left off in favor of focusing on the federal part of the city, which was predominantly white, predominantly wealthy, and housed a number of important office buildings. Also interesting is the naming of some of the institutions. So if some of you guys have heard of Gallaudet University, it's one of the leading institutions for deaf and hard of hearing students, and it was originally called the Columbia Institution for the Deaf and the Dumb. So this reflects a poor understanding of physical disabilities that changed a lot over time as these institutions grew and became more up to date with social norms of the time. Six, it's interesting to look at the development of the National Mall. So the Lincoln Memorial was just put in there, and again, the map version changed, but now the reflecting pool is right there. There's no munitions building. This is the Vietnam War Memorial. The Korean War Memorial is down here as well. So this was all reclaimed swampland, and it's changed a lot over the last 80 years, or I guess 100 years since this map was made. It's worth noting also that the map is centered right around this federal district, mainly Federal Triangle, which kind of shows and highlights the centrality and power of the federal government in the federal city of Washington, as opposed to having it centered around the geographical center of Washington, D.C. And this is really where the eye is drawn when you look at the map for the first time. Arlington, where I live, is also completely left off the map. So if you know anything about Civil War history, you'll know that Arlington, Virginia originally used to be a part of Washington, D.C. When Virginia seceded with the Confederacy, it got cut off and it did not get reabsorbed into Washington, D.C. after the Civil War concluded. And so I don't know if this is a dig at Virginia or just a decision that they didn't want to take the time to add in all the roads. But these roads do, in fact, radiate outwards. They just cut them off. And I don't know if it's a deliberate choice or a choice out of laziness. Cool Easter egg, my high school is actually listed on there, Gonzaga College High School. It was federally chartered in the 1800s. It's not a federal building, so I don't know why it's on there, but just thought that was cool. And then the last thing, a lot of the buildings that you might know today, such as the Supreme Court, actually don't exist. The Supreme Court was built in the 30s and 40s, so that site was currently sitting empty. The Supreme Court was actually in the old Senate chambers in the Capitol building. The Longworth and Rayburn House office buildings don't yet exist. So again, the federal government, both in size and scope, has expanded a lot since this map was created. And that's all.
Do you have any favorite details on this map? I feel like there's so many.
How do I go back to see like the whole thing?
You can,
Oh,
yeah, you can go back that way, yeah.
The munitions buildings on the National Mall, those were not there for that long, but I think it'd be pretty crazy to have a building housing munitions on what we now know as a beautiful grassy landscape with the reflecting pool and all the monuments. I actually didn't know that that was there until I looked at the map.
Cool. Could you talk a little bit about the red lines? I believe it said something in the first slide, or well, the first point with what they were, but I can't remember.
So this big red cross is what divides the city up into the 4 quadrants. And then the other red lines are trolley car lines, and they were operated by private operators. So there's actually a couple of different lines that go through, but those don't exist today, sadly. We have a bus network that doesn't work very well.
You said by the munitions buildings, it was reclaimed to swampland. Like in the map, it's like a green, whereas everything else is, or like the major part of the city is yellow. Does that mean that back then that those locations were swampland, or back then were those locations like filled swampland, and they're just kind of relating it back to that?
So green just denotes that it's a park, some sort of green space. But this land all originally did not exist. This was all a result of dredging to expand the footprint of the city. So especially this, if you go there, this is the East Potomac Golf Course. It's really only 2 feet elevated above the Potomac River, and so it floods all the time. But yeah, like this is where the Lincoln Memorial is, lots of monuments, like all the museums are in here. African American Museum is there, Museum of Native American History, Air and Space Museum. None of that stuff existed, obviously, at this time. And all of that land was originally very swampy, which led to a lot of engineering challenges as those buildings went up.
If we were to go to Washington, D.C., would you recommend we see something specifically? And if so, like what would you recommend the most? And if so, is it on the map or not?
Oh man, I would say my favorite thing to do is walking down the National Mall at night. So some of the stuff is there, some of the stuff is not there. But if you start at the Lincoln Memorial and you walk all the way down to the Capitol, you get to see all the monuments lit up. It's also a little bit cooler, especially if you go in the summer, it gets very hot, but it's just beautiful. They have these big searchlights looking up at all the monuments, and it's weird. It makes you feel like a really deep sense of patriotism if you're from the US just walking around.
You mentioned how Anacostia, like a lot of Anacostia is left on the map. Are there any parts of the map that are not part of DC, or are there any other parts of DC that are left on the map, like maybe north or
So
west?
this is not a part of DC. DC does extend about yay much off the map. But most of the area that was up here was actually largely uninhabited at the time. The original map that I had was from, I believe, 1910. This one's from 1924, so the footprint of DC expanded a little bit. But Anacostia was certainly very, very developed, and it seems like they cut a little bit more of that off since it really goes much further than the parts of Northwest and Northeast that were cut off.
Can we see Georgetown, or is that too far?
Georgetown is right there. And so yeah, Georgetown University, you see these black buildings there. This is all Georgetown.
Why do you think they would want to change the orientation of the map?
Great question.
I don't know. Oftentimes in maps of DC, they're depicted as chalk. Can I erase the French? Is that okay? Sorry. Oftentimes they're depicted as this kind of diamond shape, and then after the Civil War, it kind of looks like that. And so if you're making a map and you need to make it rectangular, you would have to do that, which takes up a lot of paper. And so I imagine if you take this and you just kind of rotate it a little bit, you don't have to use as much paper. So that's probably my best guess, is just it's cheaper to have it flipped and you can maximize the amount of stuff that you have in the map. Anyone else?
You said that is that Arlington, Virginia? That you
Yes.
said? You said that it was part of DC before the Civil War.
Yes.
So does that mean that like when Virginia seceded, it just took part of the capital district with them or something?
Yes.
Okay, that's so fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
And
And-
to this day, it's no longer considered part of DC.
Correct.
Okay.
But so Arlington County, where I live, if you look at a map of it, it's like it's like the perfect conflict.
Yeah.
The other part of the diamond.
Plus Alexandria.
Alexandria is down here.
It's outside of,
Yeah.
okay.
Does that mean that Lee didn't live in Virginia and he lived in DC?
I guess technically, but before the Civil War, he lived in DC, and so his house was in the Arlington, or what is now the Arlington Cemetery, which is right around there-ish, and it still stands today. Alrighty.
So fascinating.
Great,
Cool.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you, guys. You're back to the front with us.
That's all right, they're getting. Ah, we have,
Oh, it has a laser.
It has a laser on it.
Oh, wow. Wish I knew that next time.
okay, Josh, we set you up. Oops. Yeah.
Fancy pointer.
Oops.
Oh, did you turn off the audio?
Oh, the audio is off.
All right. So wait, let's see. That's also
There's a right left.
right or left. Actually, I'm gonna leave it here for now. That's the intro. So this is a map made by an Italian publisher of various things like maps, plays, and books. It was this is kind of like the western coast of the United States and eastern coast of Asia, and this was made in 1776 when there was a lot of European interest in like finding a northwest passage from Europe to Asia for like trade routes. And this, I feel like what's interesting to me about this map is because it is kind of like a collection of all the European knowledge of this region, which was admittedly kind of limited at that time. So it's based off of certain like true expeditions, but then also a lot of myths. Yeah. So first, yeah, that's the title. We kind of talked about that. Yeah. So up, this is a little text at the top that Zato wrote. Here's the curator of the map. It like acknowledges that a lot of the map is conjecture, and it specifically cites some Spanish and English voyages as like the kind of basis for his conjecture. Let's see. Oh, yes. So much of East Asia, like this part of what's not Russia, is based off of an exploration by a Russian named Vitus Bering. And he had pretty good information about the Bering Strait, this kind of peninsula here, and then I'll just point. And then kind of like the Aleutian Islands there. So this part of the map is like somewhat accurate. There's obviously some inaccuracies still. The zoom. Yeah. And then due to like French settlement and like exploration and this kind of central part of the Americas, the like Hudson Bay and the Great Lakes were also somewhat accurate. There's again some inaccuracies in like Lake Superior, but he has the general idea of that area. So this I feel like is the interesting part. This is supposed to be Alaska, and he like kind of puts in the Northwest Passage. This was all based off of this exploration from a guy named Bartholomew de Font, and is supposedly in the 1640s. He sailed all the way through the Hudson Bay over here, and he was like, oh, he saw a bunch of islands here, which were in what is now Alaska. But it turns out that this was a story made up by an English magazine in the 1700s. So this was all based off of faulty information. Additionally, this is a supposed colony called Fusang, the colony of China, which is based off of some 15th century Chinese texts that talked about a land far east of China. And the creator of this map saw that and was like, oh, maybe that's on North America, so he put it here. But that was also completely false. And then lastly, the artwork is kind of interesting. This is kind of just conjecture about what he thought might be living on these lands. But you notice like there's no rhinos in this area or elephants really, or like bird. I'm not really sure what that is. So a lot of this map is kind of conjecture. So that was interesting. Yeah. There we go. I'm not sure I'll get back.
You out there with
If you, on my computer, you can, go to the grid view on the left
Oh yes.
and then find your map there. Go ahead.
There we go.
Yeah,
Now we're back.
yeah.
All right, Dalton.
It might be hard to say, but do you know where Fusang actually was?
I think it was like, or actually, I'm not totally sure. I didn't quite look into that, but I think it might have been just like a fictional land because it was like the only record was the one text, and it was like, I think it was a Buddhist like monk who was like, oh, I've heard of this land far off to the east, but I don't think there was any record of people going.
Let's go over here to Felicia.
Yeah, Felicia.
I wonder if you give a big picture of what happened in 1777 with history, because I'm quite sure like this American being found, or it has they been called.
I guess I'm not maybe not the best person to ask me that, but
What was the question?
like
What is the big picture of what happened in 1777? Because I'm not really familiar with
Yeah.
that area.
Who wants to take
That's
that? Why,
fine.
late,
Go ahead.
That's
a Declaration of Independence is like
yeah.
US was founded on something.
Yeah. But I guess my understanding would be there is a lot of settlement, like European American, otherwise over here, but not much here.
Right.
So far.
That's
Yeah. No?
Was there any part of the map that really surprised you when you were looking at it?
I think yeah, there's mostly this part. Just all the islands, and I don't know. I was surprised that they had such an accurate like depiction of this area. This is kind of like where I live. Like it's not great, but it's like somewhat accurate. So that's just
What accounts for like the parts of, you know, Eastern Siberia, Russia, near like present day Vladivostok being like what looks really accurate, and then Alaska, which is so close to it, being just completely off? Like, why do you know why the explorers didn't go across what I think is a pretty short sea to check out Alaska?
yeah. So I was looking at that a little bit. I think because the explorer, there was two expeditions by Vitus Bering, and he was Russian, so he mostly stayed along the coast here. And then I think right before he died on the second one, he ventured to the Aleutian Islands, and I think he also got over to kind of like Washington here, but I don't think he quite made it over to this area.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Dalton.
Oh, you were right. Fusang is just made up.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Could you maybe zoom in with just the computer? And is like, have they found Hawaii yet? And is it on the map?
Oh, that's a good idea. I don't. Oh, like it would be down here somewhere, right? I don't really.
I think it'd be beneath like the inset of the drawing.
Yeah, because it'd probably be hidden.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't really find much about
Yeah.
Hawaii, but yeah,
I was
I'm not totally sure.
Netherlands, and I was the
Do you have any idea like what Italians or Europeans would have done with this map in the year it was created? Like what's the purpose behind publishing it other than just like curiosity?
I believe it was mostly curiosity and like artistic. I don't think it was used a ton for navigation. Like it's kind of like a nautical map with like the names of places like along the coast, but I think it was mostly artistic.
So this is a really interesting map, and it raises a couple of issues for me. One of them is the line between estimation and speculation, right? This guy's got both going on here.
Yeah.
And the theme of the class is that estimation and speculation happens in modern day maps. And unless if you ask a lot of questions of your map maker, like you're not gonna know. Like you need to press on whoever presents you information. Okay, so the other thing I would say is in the scheme of exploration, global exploration, Magellan, anybody know who Magellan was? And what did he do?
So the whole
Well,
Yeah, we're on the road, and how did he, anybody, how did he get there? How did, whatever, he didn't make it.
His boy
Expedition made it. Okay, and how did he get there? What was his route? South, right, Tierra del Fuego. Okay, that set the world sort of on fire, especially the Dutch and the English, because the world from 1500 to 1600, it was who was ruling the seas at that time?
Iberia.
It was Spain, right, Liberia, so it was Portuguese and the Spanish. And there's a crazy thing, the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1492 or 14, right after Columbus, they sort of said, let's split the world, and Portugal gets the stuff to the west of this line, which is why they got Brazil. I think they took the Canary Islands, and Spain got everything else. And so Britain and the Dutch, who were the other powers in the world, were sort of shut out. And that begot the British, especially, fascination with the Northwest Passage. This idea that if you can get through on the south, you got to be able to get through on the north. And that leads to a lot of this speculation. The other thing that's really interesting to me is that he wrote in this map, right? He said, there's some speculations in here. And I'm curious to know what you guys think about that. Like, does that absolve a map maker if he tells you that there's some speculations in here? Yeah. Yeah.
I think it does. I think that his drawing to make it more of an art piece than writing at the top, this is speculation. I think that's good.
Yeah,
Anybody want to take the other side of that? I will.
Okay.
Like, I think that when you look at a map, like especially if he shaded everything, it was speculation in a color, right? I might be okay with it, but because he just puts it all out there on the map, you're like, you don't necessarily know what's fake and what's not, what's speculating, what's not. All right, we're gonna keep moving. Thank you very much. So get out your computers, please, and go to the playground. And we've only got 12 minutes. But I thought it would be worthwhile to look at a couple of maps. Susan Schulten is coming. Actually, no, we've got 27 minutes, so we got time. All right, so you all should be here. Let me just tell you about these maps. I put these in here. The Cortez map, Hernando Cortez, who conquered Mexico, made or had someone in his team make this map of Mexico City and also the Gulf of Mexico. It's a really cool map. John Smith, 1616, New England, super famous map of New England. He's telling everybody to come on over here. Okay, this is a map of North America made by Delisle in 1718. And this is a map made somewhat in response by Herman Mole in 1720. British and the French, right? They don't get along at this time, right? So Susan's going to talk about this, the War of the Maps. Herman Mole, same British guy who made a map, made this map of the northeast coast of America, the northeastern coast of North America. It's in 1732. It's called the Beaver Map because of these anthropomorphic beavers. It's a great map, super famous. I mean, I'm trying to give you guys these are highlight maps, the highlight reel. And then this is called the Mitchell map, 1775. Pretty much all the maps of North America from the 1700s are British. There's a few. George Washington was a map maker. I don't know if you guys know that, but he was a map maker. He's a surveyor. This was like being in the IT business back in the day. Like that's how you made money, was being a surveyor, and you knew what was around. Anyway, this map, John Mitchell, 1775, was used by the British and the French and the Americans to decide who got what at the end of the war. And there's two versions of that, and that's it. Okay, so I think I want you guys to I want you to look at this map here, and we got time. We might be able to do this map also. So let's do the Herman Mole 1720, and let's take 5 minutes and look at it by yourself. We're going to do the same drill as before, and then we'll look at it in small groups, and then we'll talk about it. Sound like a plan? And I encourage you to take the map and push it into Google Lens and look around it. Use your AI tool. Yeah. And especially think about estimation and speculation, and also the design of the map. I think here it's British Range. Yellow is British. You see the two colors of teal, maybe? It's French, it's just yeah.
It's just English. That's why it's been down, but it wasn't. That's the way I'm cute.
Yes.
Those are just the questions. Especially you think that I think for the end of the year.
I think they go from
Yeah. New Jersey is decided, yeah, Jersey, West New Jersey.
Gonna be the Indians.
Jersey, Eastern Jersey,
One part of this.
I'd encourage you to read some of the text here. Read the title and some of the, especially in the, I think the lower left, I haven't read this in a while. Like, and just, and like, remember that this is a British map maker who's making this map, and think about the title of the map. All right, so why don't you circle up into your smaller groups of 2 or 3 and discuss what you saw in it.
Yeah. It's like, right, it's like. Yes.
Your friends, or Louisiana.
We think on Louisiana is a great culture. But so
That might not be really good.
English is in yellow.
The yellow
Spanish is in
It's not healthy.
Yeah, I mean,
It is on your.
Yeah, I think.
we're both Spanish. Yeah.
I thought.
I agree with you.
I was like,
it's.
Yeah.
It all.
Right.
Obviously, it's interesting.
It's right. Yes.
I was looking at that.
Yes. Make it English like talking about right.
Yeah, no, they messed up the whole areas where I was trying to think of being from New York, I was trying to think about the shape of it.
It's like.
And Lake Champlain is actually right above, like, it's right above that. But then if you go to where it could be here, I've already like Canada. I was just trying to think about the shape of New York is not supposed to be.
These different.
And it's not.
Yeah.
Like,
But
I feel like this is strong.
Yeah, oh, like that's
Yeah.
wider.
Like, this looks relatively.
Florida is so bad.
Also, this is another thing, this whole country, everything else in the.
She says golf.
Oh, what is this? I guess it's all. That's nice.
This was all.
Probably Colorado.
I guess like, yeah, the way they play it, it's still above the goal, so it's like the other way. It's probably meant to be, especially considering the mountain range they put there, like there's not, there aren't those mountains in.
Okay,
Yeah, you're good.
let's circle up here. I want to try to get to one more map.
Yeah.
So, what'd you guys see? What were the big things you see or the big questions that you have about this map? Yeah.
What the like actions of like Arbor Gray are, it's like in the water like along the coastline.
Oh,
Maybe shallower water.
not these shoals.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
You mean like these right here?
It's like a bunch of them like in the north, like east.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody? Yeah.
So there are shoals which are like there's basically sandbars that can be miles out to sea. And I like this is something I talk about. Like if you go to the Gulf of Mexico, shows like the trade winds and at this time all the different nations are traveling by ship and they're transporting, like for example Spain would be transporting gold back to Spain. So this is the trade wind starting in Veracruz, Mexico. And it says like this is the path of La Flota, which is the fleet. And so they travel with the trade winds to Havana, and then they have to travel up the Florida Strait, and they have to like underneath where it says Bahamas, those are shoals, so they can't sail over that because it's like very shallow, very treacherous waters. And then they I guess sail back to Europe.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought was interesting was how detail varies by who owns what land. Like Spain is much less accurate in my mind than say like France near Louisiana or just England, like New England and where it says Scotland. And I think it highlights like what people thought was important to them. As they
Yeah.
Somebody might not find this interesting, but I'm fascinated by how many things are spelled differently. So many things.
Like Luke, Illinois.
I think the most egregious is Lake Erie. Illinois is pretty bad. And then if you go to like Mexico, there's a lot. Like Yucatan with an I, which is not that different, but Michoacan with an E.
Yeah.
Jalisco with an X.
Yeah.
Culiacan, no. But Sinaloa with a C.
Interesting.
Dan Teacher. For Nantucket.
Yeah.
Nantucket.
And
Yeah.
Wait.
I think they call
Here's Martha's Vineyard. Yeah. Cool.
Montaigne Point.
Other questions that people had? Yeah.
Or well, I think this connects back to what you said earlier, where there is parts unknown.
Yeah.
And the map maker did make a note of that rather than just making it up.
Yeah.
And I think that's rather honest of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm confused about Texas.
What's that?
I'm confused about Texas because it lists as French territory. I'm not quite sure that's actually that. Maybe people are more knowledgeable about.
It could have been.
That is correct.
We're 1718.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Feels
figure.
pretty
I don't
early.
know when the Spanish broke apart and then maybe just 7 years before.
Yeah.
The French seen it maybe.
I mean, the French did a lot from the like Texas, but that was before this was brought in a lot out.
Okay.
It had been Spanish for like 30 years, so not completely.
It says here France did not abandon its claims to Texas until November 3rd, 1762.
So I guess if the world map is to be a map of North America extending by France, then I guess that makes sense for it to be there. It just kind of, yeah, I agree, it's kind of weird seeing France up to the.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So thinking that California was an island during this time.
Great question. Yes.
I have a response to that.
Yeah.
Given that the water between California and the rest of the continent is full of and not straight, I posit that they thought that we meant
Interesting.
Gulfs.
So it's pretty much from 1622 to 1720 or so. And so this is right at the end of the time that California was still prepared as an island. And so he may be giving a nod here to, right, the old way of looking at it.
Mexico shrunk. It feels like it shrunk because it seems like Florida's also kind of short.
Yeah. Matthew.
When I was like having AI talk to me about this.
Yeah.
It being a British made map.
Yeah.
It almost seemed like it was telling me a little bit how the goal was to like diss France in some way, or almost it's like propaganda against France. But
Yes.
in my eyes here, it's just like showing how much land France has. So was the goal, I'm asking kind of you, like, do you think the goal was they were trying to like show, oh, look at all this land France has in a bad way? But because some people might view it as, oh, France has a lot of land, like they're powerful, and it could maybe do the opposite.
Okay, great question. And I'm going to let Susan, who's joining us in 10 minutes, answer that question.
Okay.
So now I'm going to shift gears. And did you have something or
Yeah, just a.
go? Sorry.
No, I realized that like something that I found noticed on the map.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I just thought it was really interesting, like the areas that had insects, and it's like the others that didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think having New Orleans and the Mississippi Delta makes sense. I'm not Mississippi Delta, but like the end of the. But I thought it was odd and interesting to have the harbor of Annapolis.
Yeah.
As an inset.
Yep.
I don't know like too much about the history of Annapolis. I didn't necessarily know if it was like the center of British colonial administration or something like that. Like I don't know. I would have like nationally assumed it probably would have been like Virginia or maybe somewhere up in New England. But I thought that was really interesting that I didn't have this is like the British inset on here.
Yeah. Okay.
I just have one quick clarifying point. It says James Bay. If you go towards the north in Canada.
Yep.
It doesn't really define where it says it's English controlled, and it doesn't really define where France and England, like where that line is between them. Do you have any clarifying information, or is it just we assume that James Bay is under the control of England?
So green is
France, right?
Green is France.
Maybe there was no established border. Maybe it was kind of in flux.
It seems like it makes sense.
Henry Hudson, 1610, right, went to Hudson before he got mutinied, made it to Hudson Bay. So I think they continue to claim that. But no, I don't know what the border was. Okay, let's go to the other map, the one to this one called Louisiana. And let's just take the next 7 minutes and look at it. You can talk to each other. We won't circle up for this map. But go ahead and dive into this one, which was published in 1718. The one we just looked at was 1720.
That's right. First, this is the most bizarre thing. I totally didn't remember that this class starts at 11. I like set my alarm for like 9:45.
That's right.
No worries. Sorry.
No worries.
Oh, here,
Where's
I'll
that
see it.
today?
Let's take that.
So we can do it tomorrow. Yeah. Do you have Do you have like a? If you're gonna present a stick map, would you want to present all?
I thought that's what I asked.
No, you don't have to. You get to choose
It's just around.
whatever you want.
Um,
And I would probably go look at some of the exhibit stories that people have created on Pixar.
yeah, no, they do one.
It's exhibit 777.
Yeah, well,
It's a little funny.
And click on actually go.
Yeah.
This is flat. Oh, I know. That should be. That's cool. It's clear. Yeah. That's all we know now.
There she is. Right on time. All right, I am going to let Susan into the room and we'll get started. Hello. Hey, PJ. Hi, Susan. Susan, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, hold on. I got to get the sound right. Give me a second here. Just a second. Let's see. Just a second. Susan, can you say something?
Hello.
Oh, you're in the room. You're in the room. Okay. PJ, nice to see you again. Thank you for your list. Susan, welcome. I'm scanning the room here. You are in Sawyer 508. There's 15 of us here. And so let me introduce you briefly, very briefly. So I'm delighted to introduce you all to Susan Schulten. I do have a dog-eared copy of her book, American 100 Maps that got me through COVID lunchtimes. Anyway, I love that book. She's a professor of history at the University of Denver. She's a graduate of Cal Berkeley, like my wife, with a PhD from Penn. She's also the author of a number of books. We are very lucky and grateful to have her with us. And with that, Susan, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Okay. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm happy to see all of you here. I was just in your neck of the woods. I spent all day Friday at Phillips Andover working with students and faculty on how to think about maps in history. And I was so envious of your good snow because it's been ridiculously warm here and all the ski resorts are struggling. So we're hoping for some turnaround. But as of yesterday, it was 60 degrees. So
oh, no.
It's a very strange January for Colorado. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here. I live for this kind of stuff. Tom and PJ know that my heart is really in the classroom. I've got 2 full classes right now. We started about a week and a half ago. And I'm excited to share some work with you here. I'm going to try to keep my comments limited so we have time for Q&A or for others like Tom and PJ or Nancy to weigh in. But what I thought I'd show you was examples, if you linger on maps, any maps, examples of the way that even in documents that purport to look neutral, authoritative, there are all kinds of clues to the way in which maps are a combination of sort of information, but also aspiration, what Tom might call propaganda, right? Or PJ might call persuasion. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. All right, let's turn this into a slideshow. Oh, I don't want presenter view, right? Are you seeing the full? I want.
Yeah, no, you should do if you can.
That's right. I forgot that. Hold on. Let's do play from start. How about that, Tom?
Not yet. I think you need to hit the green share button.
You're right. You'd think I've done this before, right?
And we've been joined, in addition to Nancy, who was joined before, also Gordon McPherson is on. He's a classmate from business school.
Oh, great. Okay. Are you seeing this?
Yes.
Okay, everything's
Yes.
copacetic. All right, well, I'll get
Yep.
started. So I understand Tom's interest. I've seen the roster that he's put together. He has you speaking with some really incredible people in our field, leaders, both collectors, archivists, dealers, and people like me who have made their lives in academia. I am interested, as Tom kind of referenced, in the way in which old maps can be incredible portals onto the past. And so what I've chosen for you here are three, what you might call rival views of the early 18th century North America. And I'll go through them, and I am happy to be interrupted, Tom, if that feels appropriate, if there's something that's not clear. And I'll also try to save room for Q&A at the end. But what I'm going to start is with showing you a really remarkable document that dominated geographical understandings of North America for most of the 18th century. And the context you need to understand this is to simply realize that in the early 18th century, the French king had a geographer dedicated to serving his interests. And the king asked this person, Guillaume de Lille, to create a map that would achieve two purposes. On the one hand, it's fairly understandable that the French king wanted a map that would give him the absolute latest information about North America. He wanted an authoritative document that would combine intelligence from all sources on the ground, from European geographers, and give him the best information that was to be had about North America. But on the other hand, he wanted something very different. He said, I also would like you to create a map that maximizes French claims to sovereignty. Give us a map that maximizes our claims to North America. And what de Lille provided for him was exactly that. Now, I know there's a tremendous amount of detail on this, so I'll be zooming in with detail so you can see the glorious information that is only clear if you zoom in a bit. But I wanted you to see the entire information, the entire package first. Guillaume de Lille presented this map to the French king in 1718, Carte de la Louisiane, a map of Louisiana. If you don't know, Louisiana was the French term for their respective land in North America. And I want you to notice a few things before we zoom in. First, you'll notice that this is not entirely the picture of North America, right? But it very strategically centers on the Mississippi and all the tributaries to the Mississippi. And this is understood for a couple of reasons. The French were not in North America to settle, to develop colonies as we understand them as descendants of the English colonies. The French were there primarily as traders. So whether they were coming down from the Great Lakes or up from the newly established city of New Orleans, they were primarily there to interact with indigenous peoples in terms of fur trapping, right? And so the French legacy in North America, all up and down the Mississippi from the Great Lakes down to New Orleans, is primarily one of forts. Now, related to that, the French understood their claims primarily through exploration. So whether it was La Salle or others, Champlain, they understood that where the French had explored, primarily through those waterways, they had claims of sovereignty. This is important because it in some ways explains both why de Lille has centered the map on the Mississippi and its tributaries, but also if you look more closely, you can see how much de Lille has maximized those tributaries. You have a very, very robust system of rivers, whether they're reaching into the west or into the east, that essentially is de Lille telegraphing to the world, because this was a publicly published map, that wherever those rivers extend, so also extends French power and sovereign claims. For that reason, you can see that much of the interior of North America essentially looks like it's under French control, both through the river system, but also through the typescript La Louisiane, which is emblazoned across the center of North America. So let's zoom in a little bit to get a better picture of what they're showcasing here through de Lisle's conception. Before we leave this picture, I want you to just realize that this is the height of what we might call European imperial rivalry in North America. Very recently, the Dutch had been ejected with the defeat by the English in the East. And so the three imperial powers that are now rivals in North America are the Spanish in the West, the French in the interior, and the English in the East. There is also, of course, a very, very dynamic and powerful indigenous presence throughout North America, and that will become more clear as we zoom in. But before we leave this picture, notice the way that de Lisle has really marginalized the Spanish in the West, in the territory that I inhabit. They're not even a presence. They've essentially been orphaned to the West there. And he instead uses the Mississippi to center French claims. If you look in the north, what we now consider the Southeast, look at how densely he has populated the map with two things. First, those lines that you see, orange lines, those are either Spanish or French trails of exploration in earlier centuries, as early as the 1540s. But here de Lisle is essentially telegraphing to the English that long before they arrived, no matter whether it's Roanoke or other settlements, more successful settlements, there were Spanish or French explorers here. So that's another way to kind of push back against what the French see as the expansionist aspirations of the English from the Atlantic coast into the West. But you also see the little settlements that de Lisle has identified, essentially telegraphing that the robust presence of indigenous tribes, especially in the Southeast, are another sort of inhibiting factor for English expansionist plans. Both of those are ways of de Lisle achieving those twin goals that the French king had asked him to achieve. One, what's the best information we have on the geographical information in this area? And two, how can we maximize French claims? Many of those southeastern tribes were tribes that the French had begun to align with their commercial trapping interests, which again would also form as sort of weapons against English expansion. I'm sorry, I already went over a little bit of this, but you can see that the way the French have really marginalized Spanish aspirations in the West. But what I wanted to show you right here, the most powerful way of inhibiting or limiting the English claims to North America was the way in which de Lisle maximized or amplified, if you will, the topographic features on the map. So look at the way the Appalachian Range is used by de Lisle to essentially form not just a geographic, but a political barrier to English expansion. He's essentially shown, although there's no law written anywhere, I mean, all these are just claims and counterclaims, but he's essentially used the topography of the Appalachian Range to show that the English expansion will be geographically and also politically limited. You can see how scrunched up, if you will, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and the brand new colony of the Carolinas has been depicted by de Lisle, right? And that was a very, very clear shot across the bow for the English to kind of stay in their lane. The only other piece of this I want you to notice is, like I said at the outset, those French claims of sovereignty through rivers and the tributaries, look at how far those have gone, right? That is one powerful extension of the Ohio River. And you'll notice the pushback against this by the British. This map was enormously important. As PJ well knows, this was sort of the most interesting, authoritative picture of North America that the English and the French had access to. It essentially was mimicked until greater information was yielded in the aftermath of the French and Indian War. But what I want you to notice here is how successful de Lisle was at fulfilling the French king's twin invitations. Give me a map that maximizes power and give me the best picture we have of North America. And the British response was thinly veiled rage. What de Lisle has kicked off with his map is what we come to know in the history of cartography community as the War of the Maps between the French and the British. So very quickly, within 2 years, the British have responded to de Lisle's document with one of their own, a new map of the north parts of America claimed by France. And I think it's so remarkable that even in the title of the map, they have made clear that this is a rebuttal to de Lisle's claim. And so we'll zoom in here. You can see there's an extraordinary, perhaps an excessive amount of detail on Herman Moll's map, but it is also both a geographic picture and a political argument. You can see that he too has sort of used the map to make both claims, but also records of geographic information. Just as a small part, I won't linger on this, but this is at the height of what we call the movement to depict California as an island, which was simply a product of lack of information about the degree to which California was attached to North America. That sort of peaks in these decades. It will very quickly be disproven. But let's zoom in to see how Herman Moll is responding to this. Look at the way, instead of showing a robust Appalachian range, he's essentially minimized it. We see a few trees that are stand-ins for forests, but we don't see any kind of geographical barrier. Instead, look at what Moll has written there, right here, where the Appalachian range should be. He has said, the limits according to the French, and what he means is the limits of English sovereignty. As you know, the English had a very different claim to sovereignty. For them, it was not about exploration or river systems. For them, it was about people on the ground. The English were colonizing in terms of settlements, as opposed to forts or relationships. And so what you've got here are the English claims. Down at the south, this is not something that we're familiar with, but the Margravate of Azelia, that you can see right under Carolina, was a very, very short-lived scheme of English settlement that is now within Georgia. It failed within a few years, but this was exactly the time. And so you can see that Herman Moll, by virtue of the fact that he's making a map in 1720, he's showing you what's happening at that moment. But you see the Carolina claim, which is, of course, right on the eve of the creation of 2 Carolina colonies. So, but here it's just one. The important colony of Virginia. Notice how Moll has lettered Virginia so it crosses the Appalachian Range. That is, again, just a little trick that cartographers or map makers use to place letters in the same way that La Louisiane was expansively strewn across the center of the map. He's done the same thing with Virginia, sort of challenging, if you will, or contradicting French claims with English claims. You also see a very, very robust identification of the Iroquois, which de Lisle had minimized, which signals the way in which the English had forged relationships, proxies, if you will, with the Iroquois that will essentially give them claims to the Trans-Appalachian area, the area that we eventually call the Great Lakes, right, extending over to Lake Erie. These claims and counterclaims ultimately explode in the 1850s with the French and Indian War, which eventually ejects the French because the English defeat them and they defeat French claims to what is now the Midwest. But all of this sort of bubbles forward from the time that Moll and Delisle published their maps in 1718 and 1720 into the 1750s. So the maps are certainly not the only thing that is the problem. Of course, it's boots on the ground that ultimately create the problem with the English challenging the French right here at the south edge of Lake Erie, in the area that we now understand around Pittsburgh. But the maps are sort of the opening shots of all this. I'll show you just a little bit more. Oh yeah, before we leave this one, I want you to see right in the center of the map all the ways in which Mole is claiming good pasture ground. He is showing you where the tribes are, where the relationships could be forged. But Herman Mole is very, very interested in augmenting the possibility of the English extending west past the Appalachian Mountains into the interior of North America. You can see that here he's minimized the limits of English claims through those colonies. And then last, what I'd like you to see, I realize I made this a little bit big, but this is really where he shows off, let's see if I can minimize that. There we go. Shows off the claims here. And I'll just read you a little bit. All within the blue color of this map shows what is claimed by France under the names of Louisiana, Mississippi, etc., according to a French map published at Paris with the French king's privilege, in other words, Delisle's map. The yellow color are what they allow us English, the red Spanish. The English claim the property of Carolina from this latitude as part of Cabot's discoveries, etc., etc. So he's giving this counterclaim that in fact, the English were here long before the French would allow, even going back to the 15th century. And this has to do with claims of whether John Cabot actually set foot in North America. But it goes on to really say that the French have no business limiting English power in North America because English claims long predate what they allowed on Delisle's map.
Hey, Susan, we have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. I can't see.
just
I've minimized the screen.
Just a quick clarifying question. Was this map sponsored by the King of England?
It was actually privately published, but absolutely it is liberally disseminated throughout Europe and absolutely endorsed by the English crown. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. And so part of what I'm trying to show you here is that the imperial powers in Europe are using maps to make claims and counterclaims about their sovereign power in North America. These are excellent documents if you want to understand the latest information, geographically speaking, about North America. But even as comprehensive as these maps are, let's say they are the best we have of the full picture of North America, they only give you a very limited understanding of what's happening in more detailed areas. And so to show you that, I'd like you to remember this is Mole's map of the Southeast. And I want to take you to a very, very different picture of the Southeast from an entirely different perspective. Notice that Mole here has identified the Carolina colony, the Cherokee villages, you can see that marked over and over, other indigenous tribes, and the French. If you look at the lower left, French forts, French factories, which just refers to trading posts for trappers. But it gives you no understanding about the absolute turmoil and chaos in the Southeast at exactly that time. And to understand that, I'd like you to turn to a very, very different picture of the Southeast. This is a map that we can't date with any definitive certainty, but the best estimates are that it was produced in about 1720 or 1721. So exactly the time that Mole and Delisle are engaging in this back and forth of mapping and countermapping. But neither Mole nor Delisle give you any indication that there is a deadly war, the deadliest war to that point in the colonies, which was undertaken between the Carolina colony and the indigenous tribes of the greater Southeast, the tribes chiefly led by the Cherokee and the Chickasaw. These are not aligned indigenous nations. Many of them are in tension with one another, but they are known loosely as a Southeastern Confederacy of maps. The information that we have on this, and I'm here deferring to scholars who have done far more than I have on this map, have tried to convey what we do know about it. I want to show you the language that is on the map, which I've simply transcribed here, and I'll read to you now. This map describing the situation of the several nations of Indians to the northwest of South Carolina was copied from a draft and painted on a deerskin by an Indian, pardon me, that should be an Indian cacique or leader, and presented to Francis Nicholson, the governor of South Carolina, by whom it is most humbly dedicated to His Royal Highness George, Prince of Wales. So what we have here is a map that was copied by the English based on one that was presented to the governor of South Carolina at a summit between the Indian tribes and the governor in 1720 or 21. Now, the context here, Governor Nicholson had just arrived in the South Carolina colony, and he had been given very, very clear orders by the English crown, which was to repair the relationships that had been devastated by that war, known as the Yamasee War, between the English in the South Carolina colony and the indigenous people. It had practically decimated the deerskin trade, but Nicholson had called that meeting in the city of Charleston, very, very new port city, to try to repair those relationships. And yet at that meeting, when he thought he was going to present a kind of agenda to those indigenous tribes, he was presented with the deerskin map of which this is a copy. Okay, so that's a long way of sort of saying that Nicholson was not really prepared to have this map presented to him, and he's sorting through in real time what it actually means. It's a complicated document. We can debate whether it is a map in the way that we understand a map. But to me, it's a fascinating document for what it says at that moment about the relationship between those tribes and this new, very fragile colony of South Carolina. I hope you've had some time while I've been nattering on to sort of see what's going on, and we can try to sort through it together. You've got circles which represent Nassau, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Nusti, etc. The sort of groups or tribes that make up this greater confederacy. You'll notice that those circles are represented in different sizes. We can talk, and Tom, please feel free to tell me if someone's got a hand up about what those circles might represent, as well as the connecting lines. So Tom, go ahead, because I don't have anybody's screen in front of me. Are there people who have volunteered at all? So what might
we can volunteer them. Sure, Dalton volunteered.
Yeah, go ahead, Dalton. What do you think you see here?
I think that perhaps the bigger circles are the tribes that are larger in size, but that's just a guess.
Yes, very good.
And then maybe the positioning on the map shows relation to each other. So they're all connected, but some are closer than others.
Very good. But I want to challenge you just for a second, Dalton. Are they all connected?
Let me look. Through each other, yes.
Good.
Yes, I think so. But
yes.
that doesn't mean that they're all allied. I guess just through each other, they're all allied, but they're not all allied with everyone.
Very good. I appreciate the way you said that. They are connected through one another, but not necessarily all connected. And so the best scholarship on this map is speculating that the idea was actually a proposal, either by a Chickasaw or a Cherokee leader, to create a kind of exclusive arrangement, trade arrangement, with that new, very fragile South Carolina colony headquartered at Charleston. To Dalton's point, the size does indicate the relative power of each of these tribes, with the Chickasaw and the Cherokee as the largest, and others as smaller sub-allies within this.
We've got another question here.
Please go ahead,
Hi
Tom.
there. I'm curious, what the kind of the circle is in the top middle that doesn't have any connections to anyone.
Very
mean,
good.
yeah.
The idea was that that was a subtribe that had fragmented its relationship to the others in the same way that Dalton was suggesting that, look, the Cherokee and the Chickasaw are connected to others through tribes, but notice that they're not directly connected. And so that isolated tribe is an indication of some political isolation as well. Again, some of this is speculation, but you can see that the Cherokee and the Chickasaw are proposing a kind of exclusive. Look at that way that that connection does not connect with other tribes, nor does it connect with the established colony of Virginia. And what we do know is that the Cherokee and the Chickasaw had recently fragmented their relationship with the colony of Virginia. That relationship had broken down. And so part of what you're seeing here is a dynamic proposal of something that we might call an exclusive trade arrangement with the colony of Carolina, which was itself trying to establish a greater foothold and footprint on the coast in terms of its port relative to the very, very powerful colony of Virginia. And so you can see that there's a dynamic opportunity here that might eventually create a rivalry with, look at the way in which Virginia is connected to those other tribes, but not to the Cherokee and the Chickasaw. So it's complicated. But part of what I love about this map is that it gives us a picture of an incredibly dynamic and robust power relationship, both within that confederacy and also to the emerging colonies. Charleston was extremely fragile. It had been decimated by the Yamasee War and also by decimating that deerskin trade that the Cherokee and the Chickasaw are trying to reestablish. The colony of of Carolina was starting to pivot to another source of revenue, rice. As you know, by moving to rice, they will also necessarily move to a new labor system. And this is exactly when South Carolina begins to increase its relationship to the slave trade. There hasn't been a successful use of indigenous labor in cultivation. The indigenous people are not interested in that. There was not an opportunity either as laborers or enslaved people. And so South Carolina will pivot. Tom, let me stop there in case there are other opportunities.
Yeah, there's a couple others.
Please, go ahead.
Santiago.
So, which circle or tribe is in this map is the one who made the party that made the map?
Very good. Santiago, we don't actually know. The best guess is it's either a Cherokee or a Chickasaw leader.
Right.
Which is the upper right.
The two top right ones.
Yes, I'm sorry if I didn't know if my cursor was coming through up here, right here. Thank you.
Okay. That's at first I thought it was the middle one, right?
Yes, because it's so large and central. Very good.
I assumed it was kind of a way of saying like we have a trade route with Virginia too, it's like don't get too confident or something like that. But
Yes.
I guess this is maybe more a way of saying like they have a trade route with Virginia, but we only have ice for you.
That's right. And so that very good, Santiago, the Nassau, you can see the English path to Nassau right here. In other words, that, like, to your point, that's a very established trade. And also that relationship had already been repaired after the Yamasee War. And so you can see that that existing trade relationship is one that the Cherokee and the Chickasaw are sort of proposing a rival to, or maybe one in parallel. Anything else that people notice about the map that is either a source of question, intrigue, because there's so much going on in this map? Tom, are there others?
Well, yeah, and also given the time we have, are we able to ask questions about the previous two maps as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And I minimized all of you so I could see the full map, but I can maximize you. There we go. Now I can see folks. But yes, we can continue to talk about this one, the trio. This constitutes the trio I wanted to talk about.
I have a question about this map on the screen. What are the things in the four corners that kind of look like doorways or entranceways, if you will, on the map?
Great question. Tell me your name.
Michael?
Michael, very good. This has to do a little bit with the description. Does anybody know what those four little notches are? What might those be based on the transcription? Because it was a novelty to the English as well.
The notches, which one?
In the four corners?
Yeah,
Michael
okay,
identified?
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Dalton's gonna take a crack at it.
Is it supposed to be like a living map? So it's an animal with like limbs?
Very good. So the original was a deer skin. And so what the copyist has done is to try to create fidelity to that by showing the four hooves, right? The four corners, if you were, the four legs, that the original deer skin represented. That's all it is. Is that helpful, Michael?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I did not expect that at all.
Yeah, and there's a few of these this is not a one-off. This is a type of map that there are a few records of. There's two in the British Museum. This one is from the British Library. All of them represent geography in terms of circles like this and connections. And I'd like us to talk a little bit about what that might signal in terms of indigenous understandings of geography. But go ahead, Tom. Are there others?
Yep. Dylan?
Well, I was gonna ask, I don't know how much you specialize in this particular area of history, but with regard to this confederacy, how concrete was that? Because I'm familiar that there were somewhat sophisticated forms of confederal governance with the Iroquois, where they have representation of tribes as elder versus younger brothers, and some of the tribes had affiliated younger brothers, and I was wondering if that might play I don't know if there's anything analogous here, or if the trade routes and the size of the sort of orbiting tribes is almost accidental or merely representing like the trade relations and stuff like that.
Great question, Dylan. It is not as connected as the Iroquois Confederacy, but within each of these, and the best example of this is the Cherokee, there are sophisticated developments. As you know, the Cherokee had their own alphabet, syllabary, very established courts, things like that, schools. As you know, about 100 years later, these tribes will be decimated by forced removal, and they will be one of the first experiments that the American government exercises in removing the tribes, most of which were in Georgia and northern Alabama, removed to the trans-Mississippi West in the Trail of Tears. But your question goes to something else here. If we thought about, keep in mind the Delisle and the mole maps, they both identified these tribes. They didn't identify all of them, but the fact that they were on these maps at all indicates something that has to do with geopolitics as well. And that is, the English are trying to expand west. Their greatest rival is the French along the Mississippi. And conversely, the French are trying to expand east. And so part of what I love about this map is that in some ways, despite the devastating war and the death toll, these tribes are a little bit in the catbird seat. And what I mean is that they understand that their alliances with the French and the English are very, very consequential and powerful. And for someone like me who grew up really thinking and learning about the indigenous people as on this long road of decline to extinction, I mean, that's not true, but that was certainly the narrative I was raised with. A map like this gives you a sense of just how powerful and fluid the dynamics are for those indigenous tribes in the Southeast, right? In other words, they are very much sought after. In fact, that was the chief responsibility that the English king sent to the governor is, you got to get over there and repair these relationships because this alliance is the best option we have to keep the French along the Mississippi. Other comments or questions about any of them?
Yeah, Dalton.
This is a bit of an aside, but these are historical examples of how maps have been used to have power dynamics or kind of one up other countries. I know today we have stuff with China where America will be in different positions based off whose map it is. Are there any other examples you can think of today that countries use to get footholds?
Oh, boy. Are there ever? I have no expertise in this, but there has been quite a robust debate about mapping and counter mapping in the Middle East. I certainly got a slew of phone calls about a year ago when the current administration decided to rename the body of water south of this area. So absolutely. I mean, one thing that's sort of interesting is that most of the maps we see now, and this is something that PJ and I have talked about for years, are data maps. In other words, this is an era where the primary rivalries have to do with claims over geography and topography. Most of the most pitched battles over mapping now have to do with how you present information, classes of information, not necessarily topography. And so it's almost as though, well, which map are you going to refer to? And you have one of the nation's experts on persuasive mapping on this call, PJ Mode. So PJ, if you'd like to weigh in, and I don't know if you have another day for yourself to present to the students, but PJ has made an entire career with his collection out of this question.
The Chinese 9-dash map is a good example, Susan.
What is that?
The Chinese map, which shows a dashed line over the southeast coast, which includes Taiwan, the Spratly Islands, and that's quite a politically important development.
Good.
There's actually another, this is a lesser known example. There's a small group of islands just north of Hokkaido, Japan, that was temporarily ceded to the Soviet Union after World War II, that they were supposed to return to Japan after a period of lease had expired. The Russians continued to claim the island after the Soviet Union has disbanded, and on their maps they include it within their territory, whereas the Japanese include it in their territory. So that's another interesting.
Yeah.
I'm struck by the complexities between all these tribes and in opposition to three players in North America, and also just thinking about the is it unfair to say that the indigenous tribes ended up aligning with the French and that the British did not have as many relationships with indigenous tribes, and that was the French and Indian War? Is that fair?
I think that's fair to an extent. The Iroquois is the biggest exception to that, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, the Iroquois end up feeling quite taken advantage of once the Americans defeat the British in the American Revolution. So it's super complicated. But one thing that's sort of interesting, and this goes to another really powerful persuasive map that comes out of the French and Indian War, is that the British, to your point, Tom, are primarily aligned with the Iroquois, and that's their proxy claim to the Trans-Appalachian West. Once the French are defeated and the British have the claims to that interior in the 1750s and 60s. But by virtue of that, once the Americans defeat the British, the claims through the Iroquois become a way that the Crown's claims become American claims. In other words, like there's all these ironies and perhaps not unintended consequences, but ironies that have to do with sovereign alliances that get flipped once the British are ejected from North America by the American Revolution, or I'm sorry, from what we now consider to be the United States. So it's super complicated, but the alliances and cross alliances end up working in kind of unexpected, I should say, ways because of America throws off the colonial power.
Right.
But I think, yes, to your point, that's especially true along the Mississippi. The French had a more positive, certainly more commercially successful relationship with those indigenous tribes. It doesn't mean that the French don't have their own complicated legacy of imperialism, right? We can look around the world. These things are always complicated to talk about, right? Because the Spanish certainly have their own legacy of conquest where I live here in the West.
Do you have time to stay for a few more minutes beyond what we had scheduled, Susan?
Absolutely. I just had my eye riveted on the clock, so I wanted to.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate it. So I'm going to let the students that have obligations and want to take off to do that. And then we'll keep going for, I don't know, if you have 5 or 10 more minutes. I'm guessing there's some more questions. And if there aren't, I have some.
Sure. Yeah, no, go ahead and pack up whatever you need to do.
And PJ may also. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. We go from 10, we're going to special collections. So tomorrow's 10 to 1.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. Love this stuff. All of us. Yeah, Tom, PJ, Nancy, and I, we love this stuff.
Anybody who's sticking around as a student want to ask a question?
And thank you, Susan and Tom. Very interesting. Really
Thank
enjoyed
you,
it.
Gordon. Yeah.
Thank you, Gordon.
Thanks. Great to see you, Tom.
Yep, bye, Gordon. Yeah, Dylan.
I was wondering if you thought perhaps this was maybe a way of trying to make sure that the Cherokee and Chickasaw weren't isolated and any trade coming in from Virginia after having severed their relation. Or do you know if there were actually did the Chickasaw and Cherokee directly restore relations, or were they trying to receive goods from Virginia via arbitrage? Is it the Nassau? I don't know what by that.
Tom, the student,
Yeah.
there's some feedback. So if you could just clarify Dylan's question for me.
I think, well, I guess are you asking if it was a fait accompli that they wanted the relationship with South Carolina, those tribes.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the point of the line that's drawn from them. I'm kind of answering the question. He was wondering about.
Well, maybe now that there's less noise because
Yeah.
everyone's packed up.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it's possible that the map was trying to ensure that Chickasaw and Cherokee buyers would still have access to goods coming in from Virginia, because I thought you were mentioning how their relationship with the Virginia colony had been severed through conflict, or did I misunderstand?
No, you're absolutely right. The Cherokee and the Chickasaw had fragmented their relationship with Virginians. And part of the context, Dylan, that may be helpful to you is that because the deerskin trade had nearly been wiped out, these tribes are in as desperate a situation as the fragile colony of South Carolina. So everyone is sort of trying to figure out how to get an edge, right, in what's left of that trade. But your alternative reading is certainly possible. I mean, one thing, given that I know you have to go, is that I'd be happy to share with Tom, and he can share with you the 2 best scholarly articles on this. They're not long, and they entertain some of the theories that you're talking about. And to be honest, nobody is quite certain because the information is so partial about this. But they are fascinating possibilities. Most of them are riveted around questions of trade and relationships in trade.
Understood. Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, no, happy to have your questions.
Matthew.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. For the 1718 French one by Lille,
Yeah.
I had written down, would that map be publicly accessible or showcased to people the public or the common person in, well, I guess probably France, but then also maybe even in England? And if so, if people in England knew about it, what was their reaction or response, right? Because it's a propaganda map. I'm just curious if a map like that would be accessible to the public, because I know it was made for maybe sponsored by royalty or whatnot, but because I'm just unsure if this was seen by a lot of people and if that causing unrest.
Right. It's Matthew, right?
Yeah, Matthew. Yeah.
Yeah, Matthew, you're spot on. The map is made for the king, but it is widely disseminated. Now, given that it's engraved and printing limitations of that time, it is absolutely an elite document. but it's primarily made available in Delisle's Big Deal Atlas that he publishes that year. And so it is part of an atlas of the entire world. And it is, despite that rather restricted availability, you know, this is a very expensive atlas, it certainly circulates, and the information that it contains circulates. And so it is not going to be commonly discussed in the English press, so to speak, but it is widely understood to be a kind of shot across the bow to the English, right? It is, and part of the French king's point is that I want a map that I can use, but that also the second goal, the propagandistic goal, I mean, PJ knows this, it's only successful propaganda if it has some reach, right? If it's seen. And the other way we know that, Matthew, is that most maps of North America in the next few decades mimic Delisle's geography. They copy him, and that's really interesting. Even if Mole kind of shades it differently, his map largely looks like Delisle's map. And so it's sort of, they're so frustrated because this guy has really knocked it out of the park, right? He's made this incredibly accurate map, but he's bent it to his own purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Tom, or PJ, do you have thoughts about any of these? I know you've worked on.
I just have a silly question on the Indian map.
Mm-hmm.
There's a strange umbrella-shaped thing in the lower left. Do we have an idea what that is?
Yep, that is a ship. That is the port of Charleston. And we didn't have time to go into this, but I hope students noticed that the indigenous presence is all represented in circles. The English presence is all represented in right angles. And that the scholars who worked on this say that that's, of course, intentional. They're aware that there's two different sort of civilizations here, and that the question is the relationship between the two.
This is a naive comment.
Not at all.
But I was struck this time by the robustness, complexity of the indigenous nations and all of their relationships, and also just trying to see it in a little bit of wider context of the French and Indian War. And then Dylan, in his spare time, is reading about, oh gosh, I can't even describe it. It's very esoteric. He's a philosophy major, about sort of predestination, predetermination. And so that got me thinking about the choice of the Indians to ally with the French. And, you know, ultimately that hastened the demise of that, plus the American Revolution hastened the demise of the indigenous tribes. And so that led me to think about, well, are there other examples in the world where indigenous tribes allied with the right side or the winning side or a different side, and their cultures were better preserved than here? And there you go.
Yeah,
that's my train of thought.
There's a lot of assumptions baked into those statements, right?
Okay.
That a lot of what ifs that we can't really. And to say demise, I mean, I think that is a little bit of a risky way to describe what happens to the southeastern tribes, because they aren't exterminated. That's not what happens. They are forcibly removed, and maybe that's what you mean. But it's complicated. I mean, I guess I'm more interested in the way in which these maps show intrigue and power and pushback. But to say that the French relationships would have guaranteed them more longevity, I don't know what the grounds of that would be. I mean, what would the French presence in North America eventually look like?
Well, it was different, as you pointed out. They were traders like the Dutch more than colonializers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have the chops to answer that, except that there's a whole lot of ifs. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. I guess part of the thing that
part of what's interesting to me about this map also is that it's right on the eve. I mean, this is the presumption here is that the deerskin trade is coming back. But what we know is that South Carolina is going to pivot to a plantation economy. And so this is also, relic isn't quite the word I'm looking for, but this is a snapshot of a very, very different set.
A turning point.
Of predictions, right, about what the colony would be based on.
Yeah. Okay. PJ, did you have any other?
This was wonderful, Susan. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm delighted to do it. It's I think these sources are incredibly rich. I do wish, to Dylan's point, that we knew more, but it's sort of a reminder that some of the assumptions have to be limited based on our limited understanding of the context around the tribes in this moment, right?
This is a comment from Nancy, and
hi,
thank you
Nancy.
very much. I've learned a lot, as always, and very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah. The final thing, Tom, we didn't get to talk about this time, but you and I have chatted about this before, is that this is no less a map, but it's not Cartesian, it's not spatial.
Right.
It's about power relationships.
Right.
And that's particularly a nice counterpoint to the French and English perspective.
Well, they didn't even begin to, well, is it accurate to say that they were these were nations, these were that the indigenous tribes, they're not monolithic. They each have their own power structure, and so there's three giants around them, but all the complexities of leaders and power dynamics and organization of a community of people come to play. So it was this far more complex network of leadership groups that were here in America, met by three right superpowers.
Well, yes, and I mean, think about the Spanish sort of really struggling to hold on to their very remote outposts in North America. Are they a nation? How do they think about their relationships, say, with the Pueblo or the Apache? To say that their name is on the map is not to say that they have any kind of real coordinated power, right? At exactly this time, they have no idea what constitutes the Southwest, right? Or what we call the Southwest today. They had yet to set foot in, correct. Yeah, any place north of Santa Fe was really terra incognita to them, save for the very, very small missions on the coast. Right? And concurrently, yes, the French are an imperial power, but what does that power look like in North America? Well, it's primarily exercised through exploration, right? And trapping. So to me, I don't know, I like this map because it shows you how fluid everything is. I know that we tend to see how the story ends up, so we project back power, but we have to be careful about that.
Thank you.
Should I exit from this now?
You can,
I can't tell who's in the room anymore.
No, it's just Matthew. Just Matthew.
Thank you.
That's it. That's it.
Great to see you.
Oh, no,
All
I
right,
appreciate it.
Susan, thank you again so much.
Yeah,
Really
no, it's good
appreciate
to see all of you. Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Good luck with the rest of the course.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.